Regime change hawk John Bolton says Russia is making a big mistake by getting closer with China rather than with Western powers. This was John Bolton giving an interview to RT's news show based out of the UK called Going Underground with journalist Ashvin Ratanzi. And this is a good interview. It's about 30 minutes long. I'm going to play the end of that interview where Ratanzi asks Bolton about Russia and China. And let's listen to what Bolton has to say. Let's get into this.
Rule has been just devastated, and as has the economy more broadly.
Now, I know you were privy to the highest secrecy documents. You must have been, because Trump tried to take you to court for the book, just to check for the fifth time, I don't know, sixth time, that you hadn't leaked any secrets. But all those documents must show that China is headed to become the most economically powerful country of this century. Why are you against strategic arms limitation treaties, given that that would arguably give China carte blanche to make more nuclear warheads, more nuclear missiles than even the United States possesses today?
Well, we could talk about China's economic future. I think its statistics are inflated, to say the least, and I think it has enormous internal problems people don't recognize. But on the strategic weapons issue, what I've said is that that
was an interesting opening comment from Bolton, isn't it? Russia's numbers are inflated, and China's numbers are inflated, and China's in trouble. Interesting comment from Bolton to open up his answer.
We have to recognize that we're no longer in essentially a bipolar nuclear world, Russia and the United States. That was true in Cold War days. There were smaller nuclear powers, China, Britain, France, others. But in those days, if you were going to have arms control, it was a bipolar negotiation. Today, and we read in the newspapers from commercial satellite overhead of Chinese construction of hundreds of new ballistic missile silos, which are obviously being excavated to put in missiles carrying nuclear warheads. China's capabilities in the nuclear field are expanding enormously. So what I've said consistently when I was in the government, before that and since I've left, if we're going to have new strategic weapons negotiations with Russia, China has to be included. It makes no sense whatsoever to pretend that we're still living in the Cold War bipolar nuclear era.
Except that policy has arguably moved Moscow and Beijing together. US NATO policy has moved Moscow and Beijing closer than ever, as you know.
Well, yeah, and John Bolton was one of the architects of that policy going back decades. He's like one of the founding neocon members. Let's also not forget that you're also talking about Russia, China. They've got, Russia definitely. China's also got the really advanced weapons technology. The hypersonic stuff. That stuff is terrifying.
I don't think it's U.S. policy that's moved them closer together. I think they have grown closer. I think that's Moscow's choice, and I think it's a big mistake for Russia.
How is it Moscow's choice when the U.S. is sanctioning Russia on a monthly basis, and Europe on a monthly basis? They're sanctioning Russia. For the last 10 years, they've been sanctioning Russia. And let's not even get into the regime change in Ukraine and all of that stuff, or NATO moving pretty much as close to Russia's doorstep as you possibly can go without actually entering the country. So where was Russia to turn? Well, China said, here we are. Russia said, well, let's see if we can get along. Let's see if we can make some deals. Common enemy, common foe. And so they work together. And you know what they found out? That they actually have a lot in common, that they can get along. And one of the things they have in common are the constant actions of the West against them, especially Russia. But now China as well.
I think Russia's got a lot of oil that it's happy to sell to China. It's got strategic weapons it's happy to sell to China. But I think Russia's making a very bad decision by casting its lot in the future for the rest of the century, potentially with China. I think it is in danger of losing, over a long period of time, control over much of Russia east of the Ural Mountains. I mean, you've got a country with a huge population and not many natural resources. South of Russia, with in that part a lot of natural resources and very few people, that doesn't bespeak long-term strategic stability from the Russian point of view. And I would just urge people in Russia who are thinking about this issue to think long and hard before they get too close to China.
Well, what would
He's talking about the fact that China may actually have lay claim to that territory. That's just been settled a while back. China is not going to lay claim to any of that, and all of those disputes have already been settled. And as far as why Russia should not disengage from the West, well, what is the West offering Russia at this point in time, outside of sanctions and regime change, and the breaking up of Russia, which we've got documents which show that the West does consider breaking up Russia would be a better option going forward for security. I mean, they would like to split up Russia into 4 different parts, to 4 sovereign parts, a balkanization of Russia. So, I mean, what are the benefits? What are you offering Russia to go with your camp? I mean, Bolton spelled it out, what China's offering Russia. Oil, gas agreements, technology, money, security, financial institutions, infrastructure, Eurasia, One Belt, One Road. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. What's the West offering? What's Europe going to offer Russia? What is Europe offering Russia? Nothing. What is the U.S. offering Russia? Nothing. So, I don't understand the deal here. I mean, if I was Russia, I'd be like, okay, so this country's offering me all of this. You're sanctioning the crap out of me. You want to break me apart. You want to overthrow my government. You want to move NATO into my country. But I'm going to side with you as well? This doesn't make any sense.
say if you're Vladimir Putin's national security advisor, given there is a USS joint carrier strike fleet right now sailing to China's maritime borders, and even Boris Johnson is sending his aircraft carrier to China. I mean, as the bases increase, as the number of troops increase around Russia, as the navies of NATO approach China, wouldn't you be advising alliances with China?
I very strongly believe that it's not in Russia's long-term interest to get closer to China. By splitting away from the potential for closer relations with the West that we had after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think we've lost a lot of time and opportunity. And
yep.
The collapse of the Soviet Union, that 10-year period when Yeltsin was in power and the bankers were coming into Russia and they were just pillaging the crap out of it. When that was going on, the U.S. was happy, Europe was happy. Yeltsin was drunk 90% of the time, had no idea what was going on. The bankers were there. They were just robbing the country blind, and everyone was happy. Then in 1999, 2000, Putin came along and party was over.
Wait. Russia tried that, and as we know, the agreement with Gorbachev was broken, and we've seen U.S. policy as regards Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. We've seen what NATO thinks of relations with Russia. It's measured in blood.
Defensive alliance. NATO remains a defensive alliance, and I would just say,
except when you bomb Yugoslavia, when you bomb Serbia, that was a defensive maneuver. Afghanistan, that was a defensive maneuver. 20 years occupation? I don't think so. Libya, though Libya was not, I don't know, was Libya NATO? No, it wasn't NATO. But the NATO countries are participating. France, UK, US.
and perhaps you and I should discuss this at greater length in a future broadcast. I think Russia's greatest security lies in moving west, not moving east.
I've just got to finally ask then, obviously about the COVID pandemic. I don't know what you think the mistake.
All right. So, you see, Bolton's talking about security. His angle is to try and scare the Russians into thinking that if they continue to get closer with China, China's going to lay claim to territory in the east. He's talking about Russia's security lies with the West, right? Under the Western umbrella, under the protection of the West. That's where Russia's future lies. That's where their security lies, to be protected by Europe and the United States. But you see, Russia doesn't want to be protected. They want to be seen as an equal partner. That's the difference. They want to be seen as an equal to Europe, to the EU member states, to the United States. They don't want to be under. They want to be sitting at the table and have an equal say. That's what China gives them. China is a much more powerful country from an economic standpoint. It's much bigger, but Russia brings certain things to the table, and China understands that, and China treats them as an equal. That's the difference. So Bolton is approaching this from China's going to take your territory. Don't do it. He doesn't get into the NATO stuff. He doesn't get into Ukraine. Doesn't get into sanctions. He's basically saying, you want to be protected? We're going to protect you. But we all know what price you have to pay for the protection. China is coming there and they're saying, let's do business. Let's do business. You have this. We have this. We have a lot of synergies. Let's see if we can get along and if we can do business. And you know what? We do get along. We can do business. And we also have a common adversary that is turning the screws on us. Let's see if we can work together to mitigate that. And that's what they got out of it. Anyway, that's the video. I'll put a link to this article from RT, which has the full show, the full 30-minute show from Going Underground. They cover a lot of various topics. Really good interview. And I suggest you take a look at it, because there's a good 20 minutes, 25 minutes of all kinds of other things that are discussed with Bolton. And that's the video then. TheDuran.locals.com. Check it out. You'll find the link down below. Duran shop 10% off. Use the code Real News, and look for this video on Rumble, BitChute, ODYSEE, and Super U. All those great media platforms. You'll find those links down below as well. Take care.